I thought buying a simple house would bring me peace. But instead, it brought war. The moment I signed those papers, the HOA snapped. One car showed up, then another, then a full convoy lined up outside my property. They didn't knock politely. They screamed at me. They threatened me. And then, they said words no homeowner ever wants to hear. "We'll take it back by force, if we have to." From that moment, I knew I was in a fight I never asked for. But what they did next will shock you. Welcome back, friends, to HOA Max Stories, where we uncover the craziest battles between homeowners and associations. My name is John. I'm just a regular guy, living on the edge of a small American town, and somehow, my quiet life turned into a full-blown war with an HOA I don't even belong to. Before we dive deeper into this unbelievable story, I want to ask you something. Backhand index pointing right if you're over 50, you know how precious a peaceful home is, right? So hit that subscribe button, like you'd slam your door shut on a pushy HOA rep. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? I love knowing where my neighbors are tuning in from. Now, let's get into the story. I still remember the night it all started. The sound of engines outside my window, headlights cutting through the darkness, a row of black SUVs sitting like wolves at the edge of my fence. I stood there frozen, staring out the window, trying to make sense of it all. Who were these people? Why were they here? And then I saw it, the HOA logo printed on the sides of their vehicles. My heart sank. You see, I didn't buy a house in their neighborhood. I wasn't under their control. At least, that's what I thought. But here they were, lined up like an army, watching me, waiting for me to step outside. The knock came next. Hard. Loud. 3 heavy bangs that shook my front door. I hesitated. Should I answer? Should I stay inside? My mind raced with questions. But before I could decide, a voice shouted from outside. "Open the door. This is your last warning." I swallowed hard, grabbed my jacket, and stepped onto the porch. The cold air hit my face, and the bright headlights blinded me for a second. And then I saw him. The man in charge. Dark jacket, clipboard in hand, eyes locked on me. He raised his voice so the whole neighborhood could hear. "This house doesn't belong to you. It belongs to us. We'll take it back by force if we have to." I froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could they claim my house? I bought it fair and square. I wasn't in their HOA. They had no power here, right? But the way they stood there, lined up in silence behind him, it didn't feel like they had no power. It felt like they were ready to take me down right then and there. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. "I don't belong to you. This house is mine. You can't control me." He smirked. "We'll see about that." The rest of that night, I barely slept. I sat by the window, watching their cars idle, headlights glowing, shadows moving. Every time I thought they were gone, another engine roared to life. By morning, they were gone. But on my porch, sat a stack of papers. Rules. Fines. Guidelines. Demands. And a note scribbled in red ink, "Sign, or pay the price." I felt my blood boil. I had heard stories of HOAs before. Neighbors complaining about letters, warnings about grass being too tall, fines for the color of their mailbox. But this? This was different. This wasn't about lawns or fences. This was about control. I wanted to throw those papers in the fire. But part of me was scared. What if they were serious? What if they really tried to take my house back? So, I did what any normal man would do. I went to my neighbor. Mrs. Jenkins lived just down the road. She was in her late 60s, sharp as a tack, and always seemed to know more than she let on. When she saw me walking up, holding those papers, she shook her head before I could even speak. "They came for you, didn't they?" she whispered. I nodded. "They've been waiting for someone like you. Someone outside their rules." someone they can push. I frowned. But I'm not under them. Am I? She looked over her shoulder, lowered her voice. Technically, no. Legally, no. But they don't care about that. They care about control. And once they set their eyes on you, they don't stop. Her words chilled me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the papers. I thought about ignoring them. I thought about giving in. But deep down, I knew one thing. If I signed, I'd lose everything. The next day, they came back. This time, they didn't knock. They stood on my lawn, pointing, measuring, taking pictures. One man even put a stake in the ground, marking my fence line as if it belonged to them. I stormed outside. "Get off my property!" I shouted. They just laughed. "It's not your property," one of them said. "It's ours." I couldn't believe it. The arrogance. The way they spoke like gods of the neighborhood. That was the moment I decided. I wasn't backing down. So, I tore up their papers right there in front of them and let the pieces fly into the wind. The look on their faces, it was like I had started a war. The man in charge stepped forward, his eyes burning into mine. "You'll regret that," he said. "We'll be back, and next time, we won't come with papers." They got in their cars, slammed the doors, and one by one, the SUVs rolled out. The sound of engines echoed through the road as they disappeared into the distance. I stood there, breathing heavy, hands shaking, but a fire burned inside me. I didn't know how far they would go. I didn't know what they would try next. But I knew this, I wasn't giving in. And that was only the beginning. Now, let me ask you this. If you were in my shoes, if an HOA tried to take your house by force, even when you weren't part of them, would you fight back like I did, or would you give in to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know, what would you do? The morning after I tore up those papers, I thought maybe they'd back off. Maybe the message was clear. But I was wrong. I stepped outside to grab my mail, and there it was, another envelope. This one wasn't official, not even sealed. Just my name, scribbled in thick black ink. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead, no signature. Just 6 words, written in all caps. "We warned you. Now it begins." My hands shook as I held it. Who writes something like that? I looked around. The street was quiet, too quiet. No cars, no joggers, no neighbors mowing their lawns. Just silence. I felt eyes on me. That night, it got worse. The phone calls started. At first, nothing but silence on the other end. Then heavy breathing. Then whispers. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was chilling. By the third call, I snapped. "Who is this? What do you want from me?" A cold voice answered. "Compliance." And the line went dead. I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every headlight passing by felt like another convoy pulling in. The next morning, I went to see the sheriff. I showed him the note, told him about the calls, about the SUVs outside my house. He sighed, leaned back in his chair, and said words I'll never forget. "They've been at this for years. You're not the first." I stared at him. "So what, you're telling me you can't help?" He shrugged. "Their lawyers are stronger than my badge. Be careful." That was it. Be careful. On the way home, I passed through the neighborhood that the HOA controlled. The difference was shocking. Every lawn was trimmed to the exact same height. Every mailbox the same shape and color. Every house looked like a copy of the next. No kids playing outside. No decorations. Just silence and perfect order. It looked less like a neighborhood, and more like a prison camp. When I pulled into my driveway, I wasn't alone. 3 SUVs were parked across from my house, engines idling. This time, I didn't hide. I walked right up to them. I knocked on the driver's window. The glass slid down slowly. Inside, a man in dark sunglasses stared at me, expressionless. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. He smirked. "You don't belong here. Not free like this. You make others ask questions. You make them think they can resist." His words hit me like a punch. It wasn't about me. It was about control. They wanted to make an example out of me. Before I could reply, he rolled the window up and the SUVs pulled away, leaving dust in the air and anger boiling in my chest. That night, I made a choice. I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. I went to the hardware store, bought new locks, brighter floodlights, and a security camera. If they wanted to play games, I was ready. But as I drilled the first camera into place, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there she was. The woman in red. She stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching me with a mix of pity and anger. "You're making this worse," she said softly. I frowned. "Who are you?" "Just someone who used to fight them too," she whispered. My breath caught. "Used to?" Her eyes dropped. I lost. She told me her story in hushed tones. She once tried to push back against the HOA's demands. At first, it was small, refusing to cut her roses, keeping a chair on her porch. But they came down hard. Fines. Threats. Isolation. Eventually, she gave in. She signed their papers. Her voice cracked as she said it. I thought I was strong, but they broke me. I looked at her, really looked. The exhaustion in her eyes. The way her hands trembled. She wasn't lying. "They'll never stop," she said. "Not until you're under their thumb or gone." And then she walked away, disappearing into the shadows like she had never been there at all. That night, I couldn't shake her words. Was I fighting a battle I could never win? Would they eventually crush me too? The next morning, my answer came in the form of another SUV. This time, only one. The man in charge stepped out, holding another set of papers. He smiled, almost friendly. "This is your last chance. Sign, and it all goes away. No more visits. No more calls. No more trouble. Just sign." He held the pen out to me like a snake offering its bite. My hand shook. I could almost feel the weight of it. If I signed, the fear would end. But so would my freedom. I clenched my fist, looked him straight in the eye, and said one word. "No." His smile faded. His face twisted with anger. He crumpled the papers in his fist and spat at my feet. "You'll regret this." He climbed into his SUV and roared off, tires spitting gravel. I stood there, heart pounding, adrenaline rushing. I had made my choice. But deep down, I knew, the war was only beginning. And as the wind carried the dust across my yard, I asked myself one thing. How far would they really go, to break me? Now I want to ask you, if you were standing in front of that man, papers in hand, pen ready, would you have the courage to say no, or would you sign to end the nightmare? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know if I made the right choice. The days after I refused to sign were some of the longest of my life. At first, it was quiet. Too quiet. No SUVs, no knocks, no calls. For a moment, I thought maybe they had given up, maybe they realized I wouldn't bend. But then, little things started happening. It began with my mailbox. I found it ripped off the post one morning, lying face down in the dirt. No note, no sign of who did it. Just broken metal and silence. The next night, I woke up to the sound of glass shattering. I ran downstairs and found my kitchen window smashed. A rock lay on the floor, wrapped in paper. The note said only 3 words, "We are watching." My stomach turned. They wanted me scared, and it was working. I called the sheriff again. He came out, took a look, and sighed. Could be kids. Could be anyone. he didn't even write a report. I felt helpless. Alone. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. So I fixed the window myself. Replaced the mailbox. Acted like everything was normal. But inside, I knew I was living on borrowed time. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, I saw them again. The convoy. At least 6 SUVs, rolling slow, engines growling. They didn't stop this time. They just circled. Once. Twice. 3 times. And then, they parked. The doors opened, and a dozen men stepped out. All in black shirts with the HOA logo. They didn't say a word. They just stood there on the edge of my property, watching me. I tried to keep calm. "You're trespassing," I shouted. No response. Just silence. Finally, the man in charge stepped forward. "You think this is a game? You think you can embarrass us?" I clenched my fists. "I'm not under your HOA. You don't own me." He smirked. "Ownership is only an illusion. Control is real." His words sent chills down my spine. And then, like a signal, all 12 men raised cameras. They started taking pictures of everything: my fence, my porch, my car, even me. Flash after flash, like I was on trial. I shouted at them to stop, but they didn't. They kept clicking, filling the night with blinding light. Finally, I charged forward, my anger boiling over. But before I reached them, they got back into their cars. Engines roared, tires spun, and one by one, they vanished into the darkness. I stood there, breathing hard, my coffee spilled all over the porch, my hands shaking with rage. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words. Control is real. What did he mean? What were they planning? The answer came sooner than I thought. The next morning, I found a letter taped to my door. This one was different. Not a threat, not a demand. It was a summons. They had scheduled a hearing. A meeting where the HOA board would review my case. I laughed out loud. My case? I wasn't even part of their community. What could they possibly review? But as I read further, my blood ran cold. The letter listed fines. Thousands of dollars. For violations I never committed. Grass too tall. Wrong type of fencing. Unauthorized renovations. All lies. All fake. And at the bottom, in bold letters, failure to pay will result in property seizure. I couldn't believe it. How could they even threaten something like that? I drove to the county office, papers in hand, demanding answers. The clerk looked at me with tired eyes and said, "They've tried this before. They file so much paperwork, they bury you until you can't breathe. Most people give in before it ever reaches court. So that was their strategy. Drown me. Break me. Force me to surrender, not with fists, but with paper." I walked out, more determined than ever. That night, I set up my cameras. Floodlights across the yard. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. But when the lights came on, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Footprints. Dozens of them. Leading up to my porch, circling the house, and stopping right at my back door. They had been there. Watching. Testing my defenses. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the sheriff again, when I saw movement. Out of the corner of my eye, across the field, I saw a figure. Standing still. Watching me. I ran outside, shouting, but by the time I reached the fence, he was gone. I barely slept that night. Every creak, every gust of wind, felt like footsteps. By morning, I was exhausted. But as I stepped outside to clear my head, I saw her again. The woman in red. She stood by the fence, staring at me. "You should leave," she whispered. I shook my head. "I can't. They won't stop." they'll bleed you dry. And when you still don't give in, they'll destroy you. Her voice was calm, almost resigned. Like she had seen this play out before. I walked closer. "Why are you telling me this?" Her eyes met mine. "Because once, I was you. And I lost everything." She turned to leave, but I called after her. "Why didn't you fight?" She paused, then said the words that still echo in my head. "Because I was alone." And then she was gone again. Her words haunted me. Alone. Was I alone in this fight? Did I have anyone on my side? That night, I made a decision. If they wanted war, I'd give them war. But I wasn't going to fight in the shadows anymore. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and pointed the camera at myself. I was going to show the world what they were doing. I was going to expose them. But as I uploaded that first video, one question kept circling in my mind. Would shining a light on them protect me, or make them come after me harder than ever before? And now I'll ask you, do you think exposing powerful people makes them back down, or does it push them to strike even harder? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know how you see it. When I posted that first video, I didn't expect much. Maybe a few neighbors would see it, maybe a handful of people online. But within days, it spread. Thousands of views. Then tens of thousands. Comments pouring in from people who had their own HOA nightmares. People saying they knew exactly what I was going through. People begging me not to give in. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. But with that attention came something else. More eyes, not just friendly ones. The HOA saw it too. It started with letters in my mailbox again. Only this time, they weren't threats. They were lawsuits. Legal papers stacked inches thick, each one claiming I owed thousands. Every violation they could think of, made up and exaggerated. And every envelope ended with the same chilling line. Failure to comply will result in seizure. I should have been broken by it. But instead, I felt stronger. Because now, I had proof. I had an audience. If they wanted a fight, it was no longer in the dark. But I underestimated how far they were willing to go. One night, I woke to the sound of my dog barking. He never barked without reason. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. And there it was, a symbol burned into my front lawn. A giant X. Charred into the grass. My heart pounded as I shined the light across the yard. And then I saw them, a line of SUVs parked at the end of the road, engines off, lights out, silent as the grave. I shouted, but they didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat there, waiting. The next morning, I checked my cameras. The footage made my blood run cold. Figures in hooded jackets had walked my property at 2 a.m. They didn't break in. They didn't steal. They just circled, over and over again, before burning that X into the grass and disappearing. I uploaded the footage online. Within hours, it blew up. The comments exploded. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. But the HOA didn't care about shame. They cared about control. And if fear was their weapon, they were sharpening it. The following week, I received a notice taped to my door. Not from the HOA this time. From the county. A complaint had been filed against me. Noise violations. Improper lighting. Unsafe fencing. All lies. But the kicker? Each complaint came directly from the HOA board. They weren't just harassing me anymore, they were trying to use the law to crush me. I felt my chest tighten. How could I fight lawyers, fines, county offices? I was just one man. I called the woman in red. I didn't even know her real name, but I remembered the number she scribbled on a slip of paper before disappearing that last time. When she answered, her voice was low. "I told you, they won't stop." "I need advice," I said. "How do you beat them?" There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "You don't. You survive." And the line went dead. Her words rattled in my mind. Was that my future? To just endure until I broke? That night, I paced the floor. I couldn't sleep. The weight of the lawsuits, the threats, the constant fear, it pressed down like a storm cloud. And then, around midnight, the storm hit. Engines roared outside. Headlights flooded my windows. I pulled back the curtain and saw them. Not 3 cars. Not 6. Dozens. The entire street was filled with HOA SUVs, lined bumper to bumper, their lights glaring like spotlights. I stepped onto the porch, heart hammering. The man in charge walked forward, flanked by 2 others. He held a megaphone, his voice echoing across the night. "This is your last chance. Sign, or we'll take it by force." The words slammed into me like a bullet. My neighbor's lights flicked on. Curtains shifted. Faces peeked out. Everyone was watching. I shouted back, "I don't belong to you. This house is mine." The crowd of officers laughed. Some shook their heads. The man in charge raised the papers high in the air, like a trophy. "Then we'll seize it." The roar of engines grew louder as more cars rolled in, filling the road, choking it with black steel and flashing lights. I stood on that porch, feeling the ground shake beneath my feet. The cameras I set up recorded every second. My phone live streamed it to thousands watching online. But in that moment, none of it mattered. It was me against them. Alone on my porch. The man lowered the megaphone. His voice turned cold, almost calm. "We gave you chances. We gave you warnings. Now, we'll take it back." My fists clenched, my breath quickened, but I didn't move. I couldn't show fear. And then, silence. The engines cut. The men stood still. The night was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. What were they waiting for? I stared into the sea of headlights, waiting for the next move. My body trembled, not from fear alone, but from the weight of what was about to happen. And I knew, one wrong move, and everything would come crashing down. So I'll ask you, standing on that porch, with dozens of cars surrounding your home, a crowd screaming for control, would you stand your ground like I did, or would you give in to save yourself? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know what choice you would have made. The night they surrounded my house, it felt like time had stopped. Dozens of SUVs lined the street. Headlights blinding, engines rumbling like thunder. I stood there on my porch, heart pounding, refusing to move. And then, just like that, they pulled back. Engines roared, gears shifted, and the convoy rolled away, one by one, disappearing into the darkness. The road fell silent again. I stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Why didn't they move in? Why didn't they finish what they came to do? The answer came the next morning. I opened my door to find another envelope. Heavy. Sealed. Inside was a thick packet of official county documents. The HOA had filed a full lawsuit against me. Not one fine. Not 2. But dozens. Every page listed something else I supposedly owed. Thousands, then tens of thousands. They were going to bankrupt me. My hand shook as I flipped through the papers. One page claimed I had illegal structures on my property. Another accused me of environmental hazards. Lies. All of it. But each page carried the weight of the law. I called the county office. They told me the complaints were valid until proven otherwise. That meant the burden was on me. I had to fight every single one. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. This wasn't about violations. It was about breaking me, piece by piece, until I had nothing left. I spent hours on the phone, calling lawyers. Most wouldn't even take my case. The few who did, their fees were higher than the fines. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, head in my hands, surrounded by piles of paper. I felt like I was drowning. But then, I remembered my camera. The footage I had. The live stream. The thousands of people watching, leaving comments, offering support. I wasn't alone anymore. So I hit record. I showed the stack of papers. I read the threats out loud. I told the world what the HOA was trying to do to me. And the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in. People telling me to stay strong. People sharing their own battles. People saying they'd stand with me. For the first time, I felt hope. But the HOA wasn't done. The next night, my power went out. Total darkness. My camera shut off. My lights died. The only sound was the steady hum of engines outside. I lit a candle, heart racing, and peered through the window. They were back. Dozens of SUVs, parked across the street. Their headlights stayed off this time. No movement. No voices. Just shadows. Watching. Waiting. I felt trapped. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal. No power. No help. Just me and them. Then came the knock. Slow. Heavy. 3 times. I froze. My dog barked wildly. The knock came again. I inched toward the door, candle shaking in my hand. "Who's there?" I shouted. No answer. Just silence. I opened the door a crack and found nothing. No one. Just an envelope taped to the wood. I tore it off with trembling hands. Inside was a single photo. A picture of me, sitting at my kitchen table the night before, surrounded by papers. My heart stopped. They had been inside my house. I checked the locks. All were shut. The windows were latched. But somehow, they had gotten in. Taken the picture. Left it on my door. I collapsed into a chair, my mind spinning. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was war. The next morning, I posted the photo online. The reaction was explosive. People demanded answers. Some called for the sheriff to step in. Others said I should leave before it was too late. But I couldn't leave. This was my home. My fight. That evening, a knock came again. This time, it wasn't the HOA. It was a neighbor. An older man, one I had only spoken to once or twice. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder before speaking. "They did the same thing to me, years ago," he whispered. "They'll never stop until you give them what they want." I asked him what happened. His eyes filled with regret. "I lost my house. They bled me dry. Took everything. And when I finally gave in, it was too late." I asked him why he was warning me now. "Because maybe, just maybe, you can win where I couldn't." He handed me a small folder. Inside were old documents. Evidence. Letters. Photos. Proof of what they had done to him. "This is all I have left," he said. "Use it." And then he walked away, disappearing down the road like a ghost. That night, I sat with his folder in one hand and my lawsuit papers in the other. My mind raced. I wasn't just fighting for me anymore. I was fighting for everyone they had destroyed before me. But the question was, how far was I willing to go? Because every move I made, they pushed back harder. Every stand I took, they came back stronger. And as I stared out the window at the dark street, half expecting the SUVs to return, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about control. This was about power. And people who crave power never stop until they win. So I'll ask you this, if you were me, staring down an enemy that never sleeps, never backs off, never quits, would you keep fighting no matter the cost, or would you walk away to save yourself? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know how you'd survive. The folder my neighbor gave me sat heavy in my hands, heavier than any lawsuit, heavier than any threat. Inside were photographs, letters, old notices from the HOA. Proof of their tactics. Proof of their power. Proof that I wasn't the first they had destroyed. I spread the papers across my table. Each page told a story of someone broken down, someone bled dry, someone forced out of their own home. It wasn't just me, it was dozens, maybe more. My stomach churned. These people weren't just a neighborhood committee. They were predators. And my house, my life, was their next meal. That night, I barely touched my food. I just sat in the dark, listening. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the wind outside. I thought it was them. Watching. Waiting. Then it happened again. The lights flickered, then died. The house plunged into blackness. But this time, it wasn't quiet. I heard footsteps outside. Slow. Heavy. Circling the house. My dog barked like mad, growling at the back door. I grabbed a flashlight, but my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold it steady. I whispered to myself, "Stay calm, just stay calm." The footsteps grew louder. Then a knock. Not at the front door this time, but the back. 3 sharp bangs. I froze. My breath caught. Then another knock, this time at the side of the house. Then another. And another. It was like they were surrounding me, knocking on every wall, every door, every window. A slow, steady rhythm that filled the house like a heartbeat. I ran to the front, ripped the curtains open. And there they were. Dozens of them. Standing in the dark. Black shirts. HOA logos glowing faintly in the moonlight. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They just watched. And then, one by one, their phones lit up. Flashlights beaming into my windows, blinding me. The entire house was lit up by their glow. It felt like I was on stage, trapped under their lights, every move I made exposed. I shouted, "Leave me alone." My voice cracked. My dog barked louder, teeth bared. But they didn't leave. They stood there, silent, phones raised like torches. And then, they started chanting. At first, it was a low hum. Then words. Sign, 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 over and over again. Louder. Stronger. The sound shook me to my core. It wasn't just intimidation, it was a ritual. A performance of power. I grabbed my phone, tried to go live again, but the signal was gone. No service. They had cut me off. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the chanting stopped. The flashlights turned off. One by one, they got back into their SUVs. And just like that, they were gone. I collapsed into a chair, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. I didn't know how much more of this I could take. The next day, I drove into town. I needed air. I needed to see other people, to remind myself that the world outside my nightmares still existed. But even there, I wasn't free. On the bulletin board outside the grocery store was a flyer. My face. My house. Words in bold, danger to the community. My blood ran cold. They were painting me as the villain. I ripped it down, crumpled it, and shoved it in my pocket. But as I looked around, I realized people were staring. Whispers. Shakes of the head. They had seen the flyers too. They weren't just attacking me legally. They weren't just scaring me at night. They were turning the town against me. I drove home with my chest tight, anger burning in my veins. When I pulled into my driveway, something new was waiting. A banner stretched across my fence. In bold red letters, "We will take it back." I ripped it down, my hands trembling. My dog growled, pacing back and forth like he could sense what was coming. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, shotgun by my side, eyes glued to the road. And sure enough, just past midnight, the engines returned. The convoy. Bigger than ever. SUVs lined the road, stretching farther than I could count. The man in charge stepped out again, megaphone in hand. His voice thundered through the night. "You've defied us long enough. This is the end." He raised his hand. A signal. And suddenly, dozens of men poured out of the SUVs, marching toward my fence. I stood up, chest pounding, shotgun in hand. My dog barked furiously. The floodlights clicked on, bathing the yard in white light. They didn't stop. They kept coming. Step by step, closer and closer, until they were just feet from my porch. I aimed the gun, shouting, "This is my property. Step 1 foot closer and I'll defend it." The man in charge smirked, his voice calm but sharp. "You can't stop us. We are the law here." The crowd laughed, a chilling sound that echoed across the night. I held my ground. Finger on the trigger. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest. Then, silence. The man lowered his hand. The crowd froze. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then he whispered words that made my blood run cold. "We'll be back, and next time, we won't leave empty-handed." They turned. One by one, they got back into their SUVs. Engines roared, lights flashed, and the convoy disappeared once more. I sank to my knees, gripping the shotgun, shaking from head to toe. I had survived another night. But I knew they weren't bluffing. The next time they came, it would be worse. And as I sat there in the silence, staring into the darkness, one question burned in my mind. How do you fight an enemy that doesn't fear the law, doesn't fear shame, doesn't fear anything at all? Now I'll ask you, if it were your home, your life on the line, would you fight them to the bitter end, or would you finally walk away before they take everything? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know what you would do. The night after they marched up to my porch, I barely slept a minute. Every creak in the house made me jump. Every shadow outside the window made my pulse race. My dog lay by the door, ears perked, growling at sounds I couldn't hear. I knew they weren't done. They had promised to come back, and I believed them. The morning light didn't calm me. It only made the fear sharper, because daylight meant I could see just how much damage they had already done. My fence had been slashed. My shed door hung crooked, padlock broken. My yard was littered with tire tracks, like they wanted me to remember they had been there. But it wasn't just threats anymore. It was a countdown. By evening, I was pacing the floor. My shotgun rested on the table. My phone sat beside me, camera on, ready to record. The folder my neighbor had given me lay open, a reminder of what happened to those who fought and lost. And then, the sound came. Engines. Louder than before. I rushed to the window, and my blood ran cold. Not 6 cars. Not a dozen. The entire street was filled. Black SUVs stretched as far as I could see. Their headlights cut through the night like searchlights. This was it. The final move. My dog barked furiously, tail stiff, fur raised. I grabbed my gun, stepped onto the porch, and felt the weight of every eye on me. The man in charge stepped forward, megaphone in hand. His voice boomed, steady and sure. You had your chances. You refused. Tonight, we take it back. The crowd cheered behind him, stomping their boots on the pavement in rhythm. The sound was like thunder, shaking the ground. I raised my voice. This is my home. You have no right. He laughed, a low, chilling laugh that made my skin crawl. Rights mean nothing when we have the numbers. And then he raised his hand. The crowd surged forward. Dozens of men in black, marching toward me like an army. Their flashlights blinding, their voices chanting that same word again and again. Sign, sign, sign. I aimed my shotgun, my voice cracking as I shouted, step 1 foot closer and I swear I'll defend myself. For a second, they slowed. But only for a second. The man lowered the megaphone and spoke directly, his voice cutting through the chaos. You can't stop us. You'll lose everything, one way or another. My heart pounded. My finger hovered on the trigger. My dog barked and lunged against the door, ready to defend me. And then, something I didn't expect happened. Across the street, lights flicked on. One house, then another, then another. Neighbors stepped out onto their porches. Not HOA men. Ordinary families. Older couples. Young parents. People I had never spoken to before. One of them shouted, "Leave him alone." Another yelled, "This isn't your land." The chanting faltered. The men in black looked around, uneasy. The man in charge's smirk faded as more and more neighbors came out. Some held cameras. Some just stood shoulder to shoulder, staring down the HOA convoy. For the first time, I wasn't alone. The crowd of neighbors grew louder, shouting over the HOA's chants. My livestream notification pinged, somehow the signal was back. Thousands of people were watching. Millions of eyes on the HOA. The man in charge hesitated. His plan was falling apart. The power he held in the dark, it didn't shine so strong in the light of the cameras. He growled, "You think this saves you? You think this ends it?" I shouted back, louder than I'd ever been before, "This ends tonight. You don't own me. You don't own any of us." The neighbors cheered. The HOA men shifted uneasily, their formation breaking. The SUVs revved, engines growling like angry beasts. And then, one by one, they backed off. The crowd booed. Lights dimmed. The chanting stopped. The convoy pulled away, vanishing into the distance. Silence filled the night. For the first time in weeks, silence didn't feel like fear. It felt like freedom. I sank onto the porch, exhausted, my dog nuzzling against me. The neighbors slowly drifted back into their homes. One old man clapped me on the shoulder as he passed. "Took courage to stand your ground, son." I nodded, too tired to speak. When I finally stumbled inside, I dropped the shotgun on the table and collapsed into a chair. The lawsuit papers still sat in a pile. The folder of evidence still open. The camera still recording. Had I won? Or had I just survived one more night? That question gnawed at me. Because the truth is, the HOA isn't gone. Not really. They might be quiet now, but men like that, they don't forget. They wait. They plan. And as much as I wanted to believe it was over, I knew deep down, it never really is. Because once an HOA sets its eyes on you, they don't stop until they take something. So now I'll ask you, after everything I've faced, everything I've endured, if you were me, would you stay and fight to protect your home forever? Or would you pack up, leave it behind, and finally find peace somewhere far away? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know what you would do if it was your house on the line.